The story of Queen Esther is one of the most captivating and powerful narratives in the Bible, highlighting themes of courage, faith, and divine providence. Found in the Book of Esther, this story unfolds in the Persian Empire, during the reign of King Xerxes, known as Ahasuerus in the Bible, around the 5th century BCE. It tells the remarkable account of how a Jewish woman became queen and saved her people from annihilation. The story takes place in the Persian capital of Susa. King Xerxes ruled over a vast empire that stretched from India to Ethiopia. As the story begins, Xerxes is holding a grand feast for his officials, military leaders, and nobles. In the midst of the celebration, he summons his queen, Vashti, to appear before the crowd to display her beauty. Vashti refuses, angering the king. As a result, Xerxes deposes Vashti as queen, and a search begins for a new queen. Esther becomes queen. In a royal decree, young women from across the empire are brought to the palace, where they undergo a lengthy beautification process before being presented to the king. Among them is a young Jewish woman named Esther, originally named Hadassah. She is an orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai, a devout Jew, who serves in the king's court. Mordecai advises Esther not to reveal her Jewish identity. When Esther is brought before King Xerxes, her beauty and grace captivate him, and she finds favor in his eyes. Xerxes chooses Esther to be his new queen, though he remains unaware of her Jewish heritage. Esther's ascent to royalty marks the beginning of a divine plan that will soon unfold. Haman's plot against the Jews. Around this time, a man named Haman rises to power as the chief advisor to King Xerxes. Haman is an Amalekite, a historical enemy of the Jewish people. He becomes enraged when Mordecai, Esther's cousin, refuses to bow down to him as a sign of respect. In his fury, Haman plots not only to punish Mordecai, but also to destroy the entire Jewish population within the Persian Empire. Haman manipulates Xerxes into issuing a decree that on a specific day, all the Jews in the empire will be exterminated. The date for this massacre is determined by casting lots, called Purim. This edict causes widespread fear and mourning among the Jews. Mordecai, in deep distress, dons sackcloth and ashes and pleads for divine intervention. Esther's courageous decision. Mordecai sends a message to Esther, urging her to intervene on behalf of her people. Initially, Esther hesitates, knowing that approaching the king without being summoned could result in her death. However, Mordecai reminds her that perhaps she has become queen for this very purpose, to save her people, saying, "Who knows if you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Esther 4:14. Moved by Mordecai's words, Esther resolves to risk her life. She requests that all the Jews in Susa fast and pray for 3 days. After this period of fasting, Esther dresses in her royal robes and courageously approaches King Xerxes. To her relief, the king extends his golden scepter, signifying that she may speak. Esther's request and Haman's downfall. Instead of immediately revealing Haman's plot, Esther invites Xerxes and Haman to a banquet she has prepared. During the banquet, the king asks Esther what her request is, promising to grant it, even if it is half of the kingdom. Esther, with wisdom and patience, invites them to another banquet the following day, where she promises to reveal her petition. That night, Xerxes has trouble sleeping, and requests the royal chronicles to be read to him. During this reading, he is reminded of how Mordecai had previously uncovered a plot to assassinate him, but had never been rewarded for his loyalty. The king decides to honor Mordecai. The next day, Haman, expecting to be further elevated in power, is horrified when the king orders him to honor Mordecai publicly by leading him through the streets on the king's horse. Haman's humiliation marks the beginning of his downfall. At Esther's second banquet, the king once again asks Esther what she desires. This time, she reveals Haman's plot to annihilate her people, the Jews. She pleads for her life, and the lives of her people. Xerxes, furious that Haman would threaten the queen and her people, orders that Haman be executed on the very gallows Haman had prepared for Mordecai. Although Haman is dead, the decree to destroy the Jews cannot be revoked under Persian law. Instead, King Xerxes issues a new decree, allowing the Jews to defend themselves against any attack. On the appointed day of the massacre, the Jews successfully defend themselves, and many of their enemies are defeated. The day that was meant for their destruction becomes a day of victory and celebration. Mordecai is elevated to a position of great authority within the Persian Empire, and Esther's bravery is celebrated. The Festival of Purim. The Jews establish an annual festival called Purim to commemorate their deliverance from Haman's evil plot. The name Purim comes from the lots, that Haman cast to determine the date of the Jews' destruction. The festival is observed with feasting, joy, and the giving of gifts, and it remains an important Jewish holiday to this day. The story of Queen Esther highlights several key themes: courage and faith. Esther's willingness to risk her life to save her people is a powerful example of courage and faith in God's plan. Divine providence. Though God is not explicitly mentioned in the book of Esther, his hand is evident throughout the story, orchestrating events to protect his people. Justice and reversal. The downfall of Haman and the elevation of Mordecai represent a dramatic reversal of fortune, demonstrating that evil schemes are ultimately thwarted by justice. Identity and purpose. Esther's journey from an orphan to a queen highlights how God can use individuals, regardless of their background, to fulfill a greater purpose. The story of Esther continues to inspire people of all faiths, reminding them that even in the face of great danger, faith and courage can lead to deliverance. After the events in the book of Esther, the Bible does not provide a detailed account of what happens to Esther, Mordecai, or the Jewish community in Persia. However, the story ends on a high note for the Jewish people, and some important outcomes can be inferred based on the conclusion of the book and historical context. Mordecai, Esther's cousin and the hero of the Jewish people, rose to a position of great influence in the Persian Empire. After Haman's execution, Mordecai was appointed to his former position as the king's chief advisor. The final chapters of the book of Esther, Esther 9, 4, 10, 3, mention that Mordecai became second in rank only to King Xerxes himself, and was highly regarded among the Jews. He used his power to advocate for the welfare and prosperity of the Jewish people across the empire. With Esther remaining queen and Mordecai in a position of influence, the Jews in Persia enjoyed a period of peace and security. The decree that allowed the Jews to defend themselves ensured that they could protect their communities from their enemies. Although the earlier edict for their destruction could not be fully revoked, according to Persian law, the counter-decree allowed the Jewish people to survive and thrive. One of the lasting legacies of the story of Esther is the annual celebration of Purim. The Jewish people established this festival to commemorate their deliverance from Haman's plot. Esther 9:20-32. Purim is observed every year with joy, feasting, giving of gifts, and charity to the poor. It serves as a reminder of the reversal of fortune and how God delivered his people from imminent destruction. Historically, the Jews continued to live in Persia for centuries after the time of Esther. Although many Jews eventually returned to their homeland after the Babylonian exile, a significant Jewish population remained in Persia, modern-day Iran. Jewish life and culture in Persia flourished, and Persian Jews continued to hold on to their traditions, including the celebration of Purim. In the broader historical context, King Xerxes I, also known as Ahasuerus, continued to rule Persia for several more years after the events in Esther, from 486 BCE to 465 BCE. He is known for his military campaigns against Greece, particularly the famous battles of Thermopylae and Salamis during the Greco-Persian Wars. His reign ended with his assassination in 465 BCE, which led to political instability in the empire. The story of Esther became part of the Jewish canon, and has had a lasting impact on Jewish thought and tradition. Esther is celebrated as a courageous, wise, and faithful heroine who used her position to save her people. Mordecai is remembered for his loyalty, leadership, and commitment to the well-being of the Jewish people. Their legacy continues to be honored through the reading of the Megillah, the Scroll of Esther, during Purim, ensuring that their story is passed down through generations. After the dramatic events of the Book of Esther, the Jewish community in Persia experienced a period of peace and stability, with Esther and Mordecai playing key roles in securing their safety. The festival of Purim continues to be a lasting reminder of their courage, faith, and divine deliverance. The story behind Purim. Purim is a Jewish holiday that commemorates the events described in the Book of Esther, in the Hebrew Bible, particularly the salvation of the Jewish people in ancient Persia from the plot of Haman, an advisor to King Xerxes I, Ahasuerus. The story of Purim highlights themes of survival, courage, and the hidden presence of God in the lives of the Jewish people. It is celebrated with joy, festivity, and community gatherings. Haman's plot. The villain of the Purim story is Haman, an official in the Persian Empire, who plotted to annihilate all the Jews in the empire. He became enraged when Mordecai, a Jew, refused to bow to him. In his anger, Haman convinced King Xerxes to issue a decree that would allow the killing of all Jews on a single day, which was set for the 13th day of the month of Adar. Esther's role. Queen Esther, a Jewish woman who had been chosen as the Persian queen, and her cousin Mordecai, uncovered Haman's plot. Esther bravely approached the king to reveal her Jewish identity and to plead for the lives of her people. After a series of dramatic events, including a royal banquet and the exposure of Haman's treachery, the king allowed the Jews to defend themselves. Haman was executed, and the Jewish people were saved. The decree reversal. While the original decree couldn't be revoked, the king allowed a new decree to be issued, allowing the Jews to defend themselves and protect their lives. The day originally marked for their destruction became a day of victory and celebration. Date of Purim. Purim is celebrated on the 14th day of Adar in most Jewish communities. However, in cities that were walled at the time of Joshua, such as Jerusalem, Purim is celebrated on the 15th day of Adar and is called Shushan Purim, in reference to the capital city of Susa, where the events took place. Reading the Megillah, Book of Esther. One of the key observances of Purim is the public reading of the Megillah, the scroll of Esther, which recounts the entire story of the holiday. During the reading, it's customary for the congregation to make noise with groggers, noisemakers, or by stamping their feet whenever Haman's name is mentioned, to blot out his name. Feasting and celebrations. Purim is a joyous holiday, and it is marked by feasting, drinking, and merriment. A festive meal, often with traditional foods, is held, and it is considered a time for community gathering and celebration. Giving gifts. Mishloach Manot. It is customary to send gifts of food, usually to different kinds of food, to friends and family. This tradition symbolizes unity and the strengthening of community ties. Charity. Matinat Levianim. It is also customary to give charity to the poor, ensuring that everyone can partake in the joy of the holiday. This reflects the spirit of inclusivity and generosity that the holiday encourages. Costumes and disguises. Many people, especially children, dress up in costumes for Purim. This tradition is often linked to the theme of hidden identities in the Book of Esther, where Esther concealed her Jewish identity until the critical moment. Hamantashen. One of the most iconic foods associated with Purim is Hamantashen, triangular pastries filled with fruit jam or other fillings. The shape is said to symbolize Haman's hat or ears, and eating them is a way to symbolically defeat Haman. Spiritual and historical significance. Divine providence. A central theme of Purim is the hidden hand of God in human history. Though God is not mentioned directly in the Book of Esther, the story is seen as an example of how divine intervention works behind the scenes to save the Jewish people from destruction. Survival and resilience. Purim emphasizes the resilience of the Jewish people in the face of threat and persecution. It serves as a reminder of the Jews' ability to survive despite efforts to destroy them throughout history. Purim teaches the importance of standing up against evil and tyranny, as well as the power of courage, especially when facing danger. It also emphasizes the significance of unity and solidarity among the Jewish community. Purim is a joyful celebration of the Jewish people's deliverance from the evil plot of Haman, as recounted in the Book of Esther. The holiday is marked by festive meals, the reading of the Megillah, charity, and the giving of gifts. It is a reminder of the courage of Queen Esther and her people, and the hidden providence of God in protecting them. The Bible does not provide specific details about the death of Queen Esther. The Book of Esther, which focuses on her role in saving the Jewish people from Haman's plot, ends with her and Mordecai enjoying positions of power and respect in the Persian Empire. It doesn't give information about how long Esther lived after these events or how she died. However, historical and Jewish traditions offer a few speculative accounts about what might have happened to her after the events of the book. The Bible itself remains silent on Esther's death. After the events of the Purim story, the Book of Esther concludes with Mordecai's elevation and the Jewish people's celebration of Purim. Esther's future, including her death, is not mentioned. Therefore, any details about her death come from non-biblical sources or traditions. Some Jewish traditions suggest that Esther lived for many years after the events of the Purim story, continuing to live out her life as queen in Persia. There are some traditions that claim she may have died peacefully in Persia, though no official texts provide a detailed account of her death. One Jewish tradition states that Esther might have been married to King Xerxes until his death, and continued her royal life after his passing. She would have remained a significant figure in the Persian court until her natural death. Some traditions speculate that she eventually moved back to live among the Jews after the death of Xerxes or the end of his reign, though no clear evidence supports this. The Talmud and various Jewish writings also mention Esther, but none of these sources provide explicit details about her death. Some suggest that after Xerxes' death, Esther's influence declined, and she may have lived quietly until her death, though her legacy continued through the celebration of Purim. Esther's story is set in the Persian Empire, during the reign of Xerxes I, Ahasuerus, which lasted from approximately 486 to 465 BCE. After Xerxes' death, his successor was Artaxerxes I, his son, and the historical records are unclear about Esther's fate following this period. It's possible that she died during or shortly after Xerxes' reign, but there is no concrete evidence to confirm this. From a theological perspective, the story of Esther is less about her physical life, and more about her role in God's plan for the Jewish people. The book of Esther is often seen as a story of divine providence and deliverance, with Esther as a key instrument in that plan. Because of this, the specifics of her death might be considered less important than her role in securing the survival of the Jews. In summary, while Esther's story in the Bible ends with her in a position of power in the establishment of the Purim festival, the Bible does not tell us how or when she died. Jewish traditions and some historical sources do not provide clear details either, leaving her death somewhat of a mystery. What remains certain is her legacy as a courageous queen who saved her people, and her story continues to be remembered and celebrated during the holiday of Purim. After Esther, King Xerxes I, Ahasuerus, who is the central figure in the book of Esther, was succeeded by his son Artaxerxes I. Here's a closer look at the succession in the historical context. Xerxes I, the king of Persia during the events of Esther, ruled from 486 to 465 BCE. His reign is most famous for his involvement in the story of Esther and his failed invasion of Greece during the Greco-Persian Wars. Xerxes is remembered for his lavish court, his interactions with Queen Esther, and his decree allowing the Jews to defend themselves against Haman's plot, leading to the celebration of Purim. Xerxes' reign came to an end in 465 BCE, when he was assassinated in a palace conspiracy, which was allegedly orchestrated by his bodyguard, Artabanus, and possibly his own son, Artaxerxes I. Following his assassination, Artaxerxes I ascended the throne. Artaxerxes I, known as Artaxerxes Longimanus, was the son of Xerxes I, and succeeded him as king of Persia after his assassination. His reign lasted for 41 years and was relatively peaceful, compared to his father's tumultuous rule. Artaxerxes I is known for his efforts to consolidate power in the empire, and for being more diplomatically inclined, focusing on internal stability and restoring Persian control over regions that had become unstable during his father's reign. Artaxerxes I played a significant role in Jewish history. He is mentioned in the Bible, specifically in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, in relation to his decree allowing the Jews to return to Jerusalem from Babylonian exile and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. This was a crucial event in Jewish history, marking the restoration of Jewish autonomy in their homeland. Artaxerxes' policies toward the Jewish community were generally favorable. He supported the efforts of Ezra, the priest and scribe, and Nehemiah, who were instrumental in the religious and civic restoration of Jerusalem. The Persian king issued a decree in 458 BCE, which is described in Ezra 7:11-28, giving Ezra authority to go to Jerusalem and help lead the Jewish community in re-establishing religious observance. He later also supported Nehemiah's efforts to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, sending him to oversee the project, Nehemiah 2:1-8. While Esther's story itself concludes with the reign of Xerxes I, her story is set within the broader Persian Empire, which continued under the rule of his successor, Artaxerxes I. Artaxerxes' reign is notable for its connections to the Jewish community, particularly through his support for the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the return of the Jewish people from exile, which marked a new chapter in Jewish history. The historicity of Queen Esther has been a subject of debate among scholars, historians, and theologians for centuries. While her story is one of the most well-known narratives in the Bible, especially in the Jewish tradition through the celebration of Purim, there is no direct, conclusive historical evidence outside of the Bible that definitively proves her existence. Here's an exploration of the key points surrounding the historicity of Esther. The Book of Esther is part of the Ketuvim, writings, in the Jewish Bible and is considered a historical narrative by many believers. However, the story itself is not corroborated by external historical sources, like the records from ancient Persian history, which is often one of the key ways historians validate the historicity of figures. While King Xerxes I, Ahasuerus, is a well-documented historical figure, the details of his reign, such as his interactions with Queen Esther, are not found in other records. Although there is no definitive evidence that Esther existed as described in the Bible, the historical backdrop of the story is plausible in terms of the Persian Empire. The events described in the Book of Esther occurred during the reign of Xerxes I, also known as Ahasuerus in the Bible, who ruled from 486–465 BCE. The Persian Empire did have vast territories and a complex court system, including a tradition of royal marriages, which provides a realistic setting for the story. In addition, the book mentions the city of Susa, which was a key administrative capital of the Persian Empire. Archaeological findings have confirmed the existence of this city and its role in Persian governance during this time. There is no known extra-biblical, non-biblical evidence that directly corroborates the specific events of Esther's life or her role as queen. Ancient Persian historical records, such as those from Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian, who provides a detailed account of Persian kings and their actions, make no mention of Esther or her story. While Herodotus and other ancient historians like Plutarch and Xenophon give accounts of Persian kings and events, none mention a Jewish queen named Esther, or the specific circumstances of the Jewish community's salvation, as described in the Book of Esther. Many believers and religious traditions view the story of Esther as historically true, interpreting it as an account of divine intervention. The fact that God is never directly mentioned in the Book of Esther is often seen as a subtle indicator of God's hidden presence in the narrative, working behind the scenes to save the Jewish people. From a religious perspective, the story's central message, Esther's courage and faith in standing up to Haman's genocidal plan, are seen as transcending the need for external proof, emphasizing moral and spiritual truths. Regardless of its historicity, the story of Esther is significant within Jewish tradition. It highlights themes of courage, faith, and the survival of the Jewish people in the face of existential threats, which resonate deeply with Jewish history. The Purim festival, which celebrates the salvation of the Jews from Haman's plot, has been observed annually for centuries, reinforcing the importance of Esther's story to Jewish identity. Despite the absence of direct evidence, some scholars argue that the story of Esther could be based on a real historical figure. There are several historical precedents for Jewish women who held positions of influence in foreign courts, as the Jewish community in Persia was significant and integrated into the empire by the time of Esther. Other queens of the Persian court, such as Atassa, Xerxes' mother, and Amstress, Xerxes' wife, are historical figures mentioned by Greek historians, but their stories are different from Esther's. While they are not directly linked to Esther, their existence demonstrates that Jewish women could have held important roles in the Persian court. Some scholars believe that Esther's story might be symbolic or allegorical rather than strictly historical. The book could be an imaginative tale, created to explain the origins of the Purim festival, with the focus on the survival of the Jewish people. This view holds that while Esther might have been a real person, the details of her story, such as the royal banquet, her secret identity, and the dramatic plot against the Jews, could have been exaggerated or embellished over time. While there is no conclusive extra-biblical evidence to prove the exact details of Esther's life, Many historians agree that the story is historically plausible, given the context of the Persian Empire. Esther may have been a real queen, though some aspects of her story are likely symbolic or embellished over time. Regardless of whether or not Esther was a historical figure, her story remains a cultural and spiritual touchstone for both Jewish and Christian traditions, and her courage and faith continue to inspire people today. The Book of Esther remains, therefore, a powerful narrative that serves both as a historical anecdote within the biblical context and as a profound symbol of divine providence and human agency in times of crisis.